And the lip balm has been applied. Inside joke for all you OG listeners. We are back for another episode of Off Trail with Luke and Chandler. I'm Luke.
I'm Chandler.
And this is Off Trail. Anyone who's watched our show in the past has maybe heard that joke before. So it's kind of a fun little way we can open up an episode.
I'm glad you brought that back.
Yeah, I just thought today, my lips are a little chapped after going to the desert. And I was like, you know what? I need some chapstick. So I thought, it hit me. I was like, we need to bring this little joke back for an episode.
I like it. So, and I get it. I was feeling a little dehydrated after 4 days in the desert.
I think it's changed. You start from up here in Salt Lake, you go down south, it's drier, it's a little colder, and just natural.
Yeah.
Natural thing. Yeah. So, but welcome back to the show, everyone. We want to start real quick before we get into the episode here. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Best thing you can do to help support us, leave a like, leave a comment on the video if you've got something you want to add to the conversation. If you are listening to the audio-only version, or if you want the audio-only version, we're on all major podcasting platforms as well. You can find us there, Apple, Spotify, you name it. Go find us there. Leave a 5-star review, if you would. We think we earn it, so we'd love to hear from you guys. But did I miss anything, Chandler? Any other announcements?
I don't think so.
Okay, so let's get into this episode today. And we are talking about progressing through the field of photography. And kind of specifically with the idea of whether or not we need to get more or acquire more gear, or we need to learn some of the more fundamental skills of photography if we're trying to improve our work. And before we get going, I want to shout out our buddy Gumby. He's the one that kind of sparked this conversation. I know you were having a conversation with him.
Yeah. He messaged me and was asking my opinion on at what point do I think, he kind of phrased his question, framed his question as, the big topic is, everybody wants to know how do you get better at photography. And is it by gear or is it by, technical skills and location scouting and doing stuff like that? So, great question. Glad he asked it. And yeah, it was something that I had been thinking about already. And so we decided this would be a pretty good topic.
Yeah, it's a great topic. So we're going to get started, because we can talk about like where we're at now and everything, but we want to start from the beginning and take you up to when you can get quote unquote advanced in this field. So let's say you have just figured out that you want to pursue photography to some degree. You don't have a camera yet, so now we have the question, should I get gear or should I start learning stuff? If you, Chandler, were starting out and you actually kind of started out this way, what would you recommend to people?
So what I did and what I typically recommend is start using your iPhone, because I got into photography in 2020. I didn't have a camera, and I spent about a year just learning everything I possibly could about the technical parts of photography, how to take photos, how to edit photos, and, learning about composition, things like that. And I only used my iPhone. I mean, part of that was like I didn't have money to buy a camera. And so I only used my iPhone. And, the iPhone's it's a decent camera. It takes fairly good photos. Phones are pretty cool nowadays. And so it was about a year. And then I ended up, I think it was early spring of 2021. I picked up a Canon 6D, which is it's an older DSLR camera, and I still use it nowadays, today, and it's a great camera, and it's what I owe a lot of my career to, and that's what I would do. Keep it cheap at first, keep it simple, and just learn, because if you get in and you learn it, well, let me phrase it like this: if you get in and you spend thousands of dollars on all of the most expensive camera equipment, you go buy, I don't know, the R5 right out of the bat, without knowing anything about photography. And that could potentially end up being a waste of money, because you don't even know if you like it. So take, the equipment that you have available to you, the iPhone, maybe a cheap camera, a cheap little point and shoot or something like that, and just work with that. Find out if you even like it. Learn about it. So.
No, and I think like you bring up great points, and I think it's great that we kind of start with you, because you're a phenomenal photographer who started on their phone. Like, you don't have to go get the big, awesome toys right away. Like, literally just take the thing that's already in your pocket, pull it out, and learn what it's like to take better photos and learn the techniques and stuff. Now, this is not saying you can't go get a camera. I first started, I didn't use my phone right away. Granted, that's also because traditionally I've held iPhones years past their good use day.
It's true, yeah.
But I started with an SL2, a Canon SL2, or a SL3, sorry. And that was a great camera. So you can find cheap options if you really want. Like, we've talked about before, like, if you're sure that you want to really go down this path, go get a camera.
Yeah.
You know, like, if you know this is what you want to do, go get a good, cheaper setup just so you can start really learning with the physical camera itself. But the underlying theme at the beginning of your photography journey, like you were alluding to, is learn the skills that it takes to start taking better photos. A big part of that is composition. You know, editing would come into play as well. But I think there's a lot that you can actually learn before you ever need to get a camera. Again, we're not saying you can't or you shouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely not.
You know, if you're in a situation, you've got some money you want to blow, by all means, go get a camera. Now, like you said, I don't think you need to go get the big R5, some $5,000 setup.
Yeah, no.
But go spend a few $100s and get something you can use out in the field.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think one thing that's really interesting right now in in just the whole world of photography in general is there's a lot of photographers who are kind of scaling back and moving on to like the little small point and shoots and stuff. And like Ashton's a good example of this. Ashton and I have had several conversations about like the most random, like tiny, weird cameras and like little waterproof Canon point and shoots and things like that, you know, and everybody's kind of scaling back to these like small little point and shoot cameras, and at least hobbyists are, you know.
Well, and I can't blame them because it sucks to hike with these big setups.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's even people who have been doing this a long time are you know, finding value in some of the point and shoot cameras. So it's all about what you put into it.
Yes, and the biggest thing, and this is, you know, this will be a little bit of a theme throughout the whole show, but the idea of learning the different skills that are involved to take a good photo, like that is something that's going to help you out through your entire journey. Like, it's going to stay with you forever. Yeah. Like, you can't just keep getting more gear and expect to be better. You're going to have to learn these things at some point. Yeah. And at the beginning, I think, you know, we are in agreement. Just go learn that stuff right away. Spend the time, like, dive into it and learn a lot of what, you know, the technical side of what it means, like what good photos look like. Yeah. So when you get out there with whatever camera you have, you can start taking better photos like that. You know, some landscape stuff, just take it with your phone. Like, I mean, we're taking at a very similar focal length anyway. Yeah. You know, now iPhones have RAW capabilities, so it's like you have a lot of editing, like room to play in editing. Like, there's a lot you can do without having to go spend the money.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think a good example of this is last year you guys went and hiked Lake Blanche in the snow, right? And you got a photo of Sundial Peak.
I only took a photo with my phone. I didn't even get my camera because my fingers were frozen.
It's one of your favorite photos.
Oh, yeah. And part of that has to do just with the memory itself. Yeah. You know, is it the best photo I've ever taken? No. But, like, it's still a great photo. You know, there's meaning behind it and everything. And even though, like, again, my hands felt like they're about to fall off, I was still thinking, okay, like, how am I going to frame this up now? It's a very basic frame. Yeah. But nonetheless, even in that situation, it was like, oh, just my phone. I'm still like, what's going to look good when I'm taking this shot? And again, those skills just stick with you. Yeah. Throughout your entire journey. It doesn't matter what kind of gear you have. You know, you can do it with a point and shoot camera, like you said. You can do it with an iPhone. You can do it with a cheap camera. You can do it with an expensive setup. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Yep. So, you know, at the beginning, again, we're in agreement. If you want to go get a camera, get a camera. We recommend getting something cheaper, but learning the skills, and again, composition, I think, is a big one. Learning how to take different compositions is huge. That's going to get you to, like, maybe like the next step where you can kind of justify what we would, you know, at this phase, going and getting a little bit of gear. you know, whatever that looks like. You get a little bit better of a camera, get a little bit better of a lens, whatever it's going to be. You know, especially when you're starting out, you may be using a very cheap, basic camera with like a kit lens, right? So maybe this stage is when, oh, maybe I'll get my first lens. That is a little bit more expensive, but a lot better quality than you're going to get right at the beginning, whether it's with your phone or a kit lens. You know, for me, I think back to when I started, and for whatever reason, I thought that the first lens I should get was the 100mm macro. Now, interesting choice.
That is
young
an interesting
Luke.
choice, yeah.
The reason I did that was because at the time I was shooting a little bit more sports stuff, and I didn't want to shell out for a 70 to 200, and a 24 to 70 wasn't quite enough range for me. So I got the 100mm macro. Never used it for macro. I just wanted a little bit of reach with it.
Yeah. I think I maybe used it for more macro than you ever did.
Yeah, but that's a great example, right? It's like I got started. I had the kit lenses, and I had the Nifty 50 when I started. That was the two kit lenses, and the Nifty 50 when I started, and then I got the 100mm macro. But I got it for a certain reason. Like there was a use case that if I wanted to adapt my work, you know, add something to my portfolio, I needed something that helped me get photos that were better quality in those situations. I was shooting indoor sports, so lighting's tough. Kit lens is not great for that.
No, yeah.
And so I got the 100mm macro. It goes down to f2.8, and that started giving me more room to play with my photos, that I could start achieving some of the things I wanted. You know, and I think whether it's with reach or with aperture, like there's stuff like that where once you get to a certain point, again, like when you know what you're doing, at least enough, that you can start justifying, hey, I should probably get another piece of gear.
Yeah. It's funny because I've run into this a lot where I know I can take, well, okay, so I generally, most of my stuff that I shoot is with this Tamron 17 to 35. It's the best lens I have. I don't have a lot of fancy glass. I just don't. I have, you know, some older EF lenses, and I just don't have like a lot of fancy RF glass or anything.
And before we move on, again, this is kind of the point. You know, some underlying theme of this whole episode. You don't have a ton of that fancy stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, you have an R6 Mark II, but you don't have a ton of the fancy glass.
Yeah, no.
And yet you can still take the photos that you do.
Yeah.
Like you can do so much if you know what you're doing with the camera. And that's kind of what we want to get at with a lot of this.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's been some cases, and the example I was going to bring up is a few weeks ago I went and shot a wedding, and I knew I was going to need I knew it was going to be somewhat of a darker venue. I knew I was going to need something that had a little bit more reach as far as aperture goes, you know, something that went a little bit wider, and something that was a little bit more telephoto as well. So I ended up going and renting a RF 28 to 70, which is an f2 lens. And I needed that lens because I needed something that could just give me a little bit more brightness, something that can give me a little more reach, something that can give me a little bit, because, I mean, just I get basic camera tech stuff. The lower your aperture, the wider your aperture, like the higher you can raise your shutter speed. You know, you could make things, you just work that exposure triangle a little bit better.
And if you're in a wedding, you know, especially like say a reception, because a 24 to 70 or 28, I forget what you said, is a great lens for like the reception,
it's
right?
Perfect.
But that's when people are dancing and stuff. And if you don't have something like that that allows you to get a little bit more light in with your aperture, now your shutter speed may suffer.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to get people dancing and get sharp photos, you may not be able to get them the way you want.
Yeah,
and that's where, again, certain gear can start to unlock new things for you.
Yeah. So that's what it's about. It's just like, it's figuring out what different types of gear can do different types of things. You know, I think another good example is your 50 1.2, that 50 millimeter RF 1.2 lens. And because you can get some looks and some images out of that lens that are unlike anything I've ever seen. And it's because of that 1.2 aperture.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And like, I think for me, like I want to push that talk with my 50 off, like just like another step almost, but it applies. Like, like I have that lens for a reason, because there's things that I like to do with my work that I simply couldn't do if I didn't have that the ability to do it. But it gets back to this idea that I didn't get that lens, or you didn't get that lens, without kind of knowing why I needed it.
Yes.
You know, when you're ever thinking about getting gear, I think a very important question to ask yourself is, what am I going to use this for?
Yeah.
And like what's the use case?
Yeah.
You know, if you're wanting to get into a different genre or something that you don't normally do, and there's a good reason to get it, well, you can justify getting some new gear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and cameras work the same way, not just lenses. I want to be clear about that too. Like, you get a better camera, you might have better low light performance, whatever. Like full frame from APS-C. There's benefits to be had from improving your camera as well. But like the underlying theme here is you should kind of have an idea of what it is you're trying to accomplish with your work.
Yeah.
If you want to look at getting new gear, because otherwise the gear is not going to help you. Like, I look back now, I'm like, why did I get a 100mm macro? Like, it was stupid of me. I should have just got the 70-200. Again, it was a little more money at the time, but like that was the play. Like, I got it because it's a little cheaper. So sure, maybe that was smart back then. But if you don't know enough, like, do research, ask people like you and me, reach out to us and ask for our opinion.
Yeah.
Figure out what it is you truly need if you want to accomplish something new or take your work to the next level before you just jump into a big purchase like that.
Yeah. And I think, you know, to kind of bring this back around, if you don't understand those basics that you learn when you're first getting into photography, if you don't understand what, you know, all these little things do, the exposure triangle, aperture, shutter speed, if you don't know how a camera operates and how a photo is made, you're not going to understand why each of these little pieces of equipment can do the things that they can do and why they can improve different types of images. So.
Yeah, you know, it's a very important thing. And, you know, we're kind of glossing over the whole editing side of things as well.
Yeah.
Because that's, you know, that's a big reason why you get images that look the way they do on your work. And same with me. That's a whole other side of it, though. And, you know, we've talked about it before, at least off air. It's like, to some degree, you got to just like work through that on your own and figure out what it is you like, what you don't like. Look at someone else's work. See if you can try to mimic some of that stuff. But even then, like, you know, you can go to others for help too, and that'll start to take your work to a different level as well.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really good bridge, you know, talking about getting like another, like maybe your first piece of good gear, learning editing, where we can bring in our producer, BDOTES.
Hello.
BDOTES is a guy who's a great photographer who's kind of in this phase right now. Like, we were talking about it last time after we were recording for a while. You know, you recently got, well, not recently, maybe anymore, but you got your lens, like a 70-300?
Yep, the Tamron 70-300.
Yeah. So you got a 70-300, and you're starting to get the hang of editing more too, which means your work is now going to jump to a different level with enough effort in this space now, right? And I remember when you first got that lens, I mean, you were crazy about it. Like, you texted all of us, sent us the first photos you took. I remember it was elk or deer, whichever one it was.
Yeah.
You know,
So
like,
I think I had borrowed Nimitz 70-300. We went up to Echo Canyon, shot some elk up there, and I was like, yeah, I like this thing. And then I think maybe a couple weeks later, I ordered my own, and here we are.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we actually talked about that on a different podcast a long time ago. But in a way, for you, like, this is what this conversation's about. And if you want to chime in, please chime in here. But getting a piece of gear like that kind of unlocks new potential that you can start to go seize and like take control of. Whereas before, it's like, oh, I have this gear, but it's like, I'm kind of just stuck.
Right.
But now you got a lot more that's open to you.
So prior to this, I only had my kit 16-50mm, and then I had gotten a 16mm prime, so I didn't have very much focal length, so I was kind of limited there. And now that I have this, I can get solitary subjects. It's been nice.
Yeah, and like, I think that's like the great example of what we're trying to talk about. You get a lens like that, and suddenly the world opens up in ways that you couldn't see before. But now when you go out, you get the joy of saying, oh, like, I didn't used to be able to take this kind of photo, but now I'm looking for photos in a different way. And that process of going out and looking for new things all the time with different focal lengths, different compositions, whatever it may be, that is like the process that's going to take you in your work to the next level.
Yep. And it's just, it's cool, especially when, like, I mean, for me, I don't have I have that 100-300 really old Canon lens, but I don't use it a ton just because it's from 1987.
It's old.
It's old,
Is that
yeah.
the pencil sharpener?
That's the pencil sharpener, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. If you haven't watched that vlog, go watch it. It's great. But every once in a while, I do this thing where I will go and rent like a big telephoto lens just to bring it on like a trip. And just because it gives me something, I don't know, to kind of play with, something to be a little bit creative with. Like, we went to Southern Utah this previous weekend, and I rented a 150-600 Sigma lens. And maybe that was more than I needed, but it was really, really fun to use. I could set it up somewhere, and then I could just turn around and just be on a swivel and just shoot all these different compositions that I thought were interesting. And it was really cool, and it's kind of a cool creative exercise to do something like that. Not to turn this into a conversation about telephoto lenses, but just play with that.
No, but I think that is part of this conversation, because a lot of people, they probably do get like wide angle stuff, especially if they're landscape people.
Yeah.
They start wide. Like me personally, I almost don't shoot telephoto whatsoever.
Yeah.
I almost never go past 50 millimeters, right? Now, that's just the kind of stuff I like to do. But because a lot of people don't shoot that stuff, if you get something that has that kind of reach, again, like we were talking about with BDOTES, it starts to open up new doors for you. And like I can say something that I've always wanted to try, but I don't have the gear for, is to shoot photos of the moon.
Yeah.
And we were doing that.
Yeah, we did that,
with your lens. And like, that's awesome. But you can't do that with a 16 prime, right? Because the moon's that big, And so like, if there's a great example there of, if you want to try something new, like, yeah, you should get some different gear to help you take those leaps and those steps if you want to, take your work in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
That reminds me of Jared. He just shot Timpanogos, and he got the hut with like 2 people, and he ended up finding him on Facebook, and it was those same 2 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. There's so many different ways you can go just by getting different gear, trying new stuff out.
Yeah, like getting gear, and this is, again, there's a balance here to be struck between getting gear and learning new things. But getting gear is something that will help you in your journey. The claim we're trying to make is just do it in the right way, do it smartly.
Be thoughtful about it.
Yes,
So.
like make sure you have a good reason to justify getting new gear, because that ultimately, like when you're being intentional about it, that is what's going to take you to where you want to be.
Absolutely.
So now we got to get in this phase here where, we maybe picked up our first lens or something, and, we're progressing, we're getting good. And I think this is where I start to throw my situation with my 50 into the mix. For those who don't know, I used to shoot just on a 24-70. It was great. But after being in Utah for a bit, I just felt like I was in a funk for whatever reason. I don't know why. I just was not liking any of my stuff. It was just a phase I went through where it was just a weird little thing to deal with. But I decided I was going to just sell that lens. And this is not smart financial advice, mind you. I decided I was going to sell that lens and then pick up a 15-35 and my 50, which it's the 50 f1.2. Now, those both are great lenses.
Yeah.
Phenomenal glass. Not cheap. But what that did for me, especially, I got the wide angle for landscape stuff because I always felt like I wanted a little more reach. But the 50 in particular, the reason that I was like, I'm going to try this was because now at a fixed focal length, this forces me to now look for things in new ways that before it's like, oh, I'll just zoom in or zoom out. Like it was easy, but now I have to move my feet everywhere to get a shot I want. I got to get in the right angle, whatever that's going to be. But without taking that step and just being like, you know what, screw it, getting rid of this lens, taking the jump, getting my 50, like I would have just been stuck. And now this is not to say that you can't take those leaps with a 24-70 and shoot everything on that. My special case was I just felt like I was in a rut. But if you are continuing to learn new things and push yourself, this is kind of a phase now where it's like you don't really know which direction to go in. And everyone's going to be in their own little spot.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's funny. I have kind of reached that same spot. Well, I guess, like, I mean, a couple months ago I did. I've kind of been working my way out of it, where I got to a point where I was in a little bit of a funk, and I was like, I don't know what to photograph. I don't know how to make things look interesting, whatever. And I just feel like I am at a stopping point in my growth. And the way that I approached that wasn't with gear. You know, some people do, you know, they get a new camera, they get a new lens or whatever. I realized that I still have a lot to learn about, like, composition and location hunting and things like that. And so I've been practicing composition so hard the last few months. And
you're still bad at it.
And I'm still really bad at it, but we're getting there.
Just kidding. He's great.
But, and you know, and that's where, like, I've seen, you know, some of the biggest improvement in my photographs over the last 2 years is the last few months, where I've been really trying to push myself on composition and shooting things that maybe I'd never would have thought about shooting, and trying to frame things differently, making sure that things are, I guess, one of the reasons I started wanting to do this is I went up to Glacier National Park, right, and got a bunch of photos there. A lot of them I love. There's a lot of them that I thought that I would love more than I did, and I got them back, and I realized, why did I shoot these like this? Why did I shoot these at this angle? And
which sucks, because Glacier's so far away.
It's so far away, and it's so great, and, like, the photos turned out so cool, but it's like they're all off balance and stuff. And I was like, why did I do this? I didn't even think about, you know, I was just so excited about, you know, being there. I didn't think through my compositions. And so I posted one of those photos, and maybe you remember this. I posted a photo. It was a full landscape, or like a horizontal image. And I had put, like, the 2x3 crop version, and then I had put a more square crop version of it. And I was like, I think the square crop version works better, because I don't think the composition worked. This was my caption on it. I was talking about.
I do remember this, actually. Yeah.
And I had gotten a couple people who commented, and they're like, yeah, I think I like the square one better. And I was like, man, that's what I need to work on. That's where I need to put my focus to, is my composition skills. And, you know, trying to make images look interesting through that aspect, and not through, like, my editing. I've always focused on my editing, and that's always been my biggest focus, is how do I make the best photos by editing them. And I realized, now my composition skills are totally lacking. So
yeah, and I think, like, that's a good junction now where, like, editing comes back into play.
Yeah,
you know, again, you've kind of got your groove, but you're doing well. Maybe got some good gear, at least something at this point. And now you're like, okay, well, do I get more gear? Do I learn new things? Like, you know, there's a lot of different ways you could go. And again, for you is a great example. For me, it's the same way. It's like learning new things is now going to get you different looks that you want to try and get with your work. Whether it's landscapes, portraits, abstract, it could be anything. Automotive, you can name any genre of photography, and it applies to it. Once you get to a point where you got gear where you can, you know, accomplish a certain in-camera look, now it's like, okay, well, you got to learn how to get that look, and then you also got to learn how to edit. And there's two different roads there you can go. You definitely went in the editing phase, and, like, you learned it really quick.
Yeah,
and you'd done a great job with that. Like, for me with editing, like, I just kind of stuck with something very basic, I'd say, for a long time. And then at some point I was like, you know what? I want to switch this up. Yeah. You know? And then I just figured out how to learn a new style of editing completely. And now all of my images are edited like that.
And they look phenomenal.
Yeah. It's just, but, you know, gear would not have done that for me.
No. Yeah.
Like, some aspects of my image I needed the gear for, like my 50. But getting new gear was not going to help me get a different look to take, again, my work to a level where I was like, you know what? I want to try and get to this point now. Like, you got to learn that. But in picking up those editing skills, I was literally I went back to an old photo from when we went down to southern Utah earlier this year, back in Cathedral Valley. I took a photo, and because we're, you know, in spooky season here, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this photo spooky. And sure enough, I did a pretty good job of doing that. But, like, and it came out quick, but that's only because, like, I started spending more time figuring out, like, how can I get certain looks with things and just playing with settings. And unless you spend the time doing those things and really learning and diving into those skills, you're never going to have like that extra like tool in your bag that you can go to.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think at this point, you know, you get to a phase where it's like, this is just like the continual like phase you're stuck in. It's like, well, do I get new gear? Do I keep learning new things? Right?
Yeah.
Like I would say that's kind of where both you and me are at now. It's like, well, what do we want to do? Like, where do we want to take this anymore? Right? You know, like I definitely have what I feel like the gear I need. Like no part of me thinks I need new stuff.
I think you have the perfect setup.
Like, sure, there are certain things that I would want to try. Like, let's say I want to try wildlife more, which I would like to maybe do one day.
Yeah.
I don't have that set up.
Yeah, no.
You know, I'm not going to go up to the bear with my 50 and be like, yo, hey, smile, bro. You know, like there's certain things like that that's, you know, if I want to branch off into other things, I'm going to have to get some gear.
Yeah.
And so for me, a lot of it's just like playing around with composition, editing, technique, anything like that, just to see what I like and what I don't like and push myself forward in that way.
Yeah.
And I think you're in the same boat.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is this is something that I've an approach that I've always had just to life in general is I always assume that there's always going to be more to learn about everything. You know, that there's always going to be something more to learn. And especially with photography. Photography is such a massive field. There's so many different things to learn, you know, like composition, editing, different, you know, technical in-camera skills and things like that. So it's never ending. And it's just, I mean, life in general is just a whole learning process.
It's an enigma.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows what life is like?
Yeah.
But you know, with this whole conversation, you know, we're talking about photography and stuff too, but I also want to make the point, like you kind of were getting at there. It's like, this is not just about photos. This is about anything in life. Like I can relate it to my coaching days back when I was coaching volleyball. That's why I wore my old coaching hoodie today for the show. The Mastodons. Go IPFW, now just PFW, but the I will always be in the name for me.
Wait.
Yeah, it's a long story. The name changed to the school and everything.
Ah, gotcha.
But I used to coach, and like you get players who get really good, right? And for me, like, especially when I was playing with like our girls in practice, like I was better than the girls because I had a lot more experience. Like I play at a different level because, you know, the men's game is different than the women's game. And so it gets to a point where, yeah, I could go, you know, it's not quite perfect because gear in something like this doesn't really apply, but I can teach you a technique, right? We'll say that's the gear. I can teach you how to hit a ball. But once you get good enough, I have to teach you where to hit a ball and why you should hit a ball there. And to learn and think about the game while you're playing it. Like in this example, the strategy behind the game is almost like the skills idea. Because while I'm playing, I'm thinking, okay, if I hit the ball over here, there's a good chance you're not going to be there. Or if I want to put the ball there, I have to put myself in a different position to start with. Like there's a lot of those things that come into play. But if you can think about those things while you're playing, you are now taking your game to the next level. Because a lot of players can't do that as well. They can do everything technically really great, but they can't think and react on the fly to get that advantage over you. Yeah. Like I would always make the comment when I was setting, you know, I can go set a ball. I can put great balls to my outside, my right side, my middle hitters. And that's what a lot of our setters could do. But when I'm on the court setting, I'm seeing the entire other side of the defense before I make a decision on where to set the ball. And that gives me the advantage because I can see that middle move a half a step one way and I say, I got you.
Yeah.
I'm going the other way. And you're not going to get there.
Yeah.
But unless you take the time to get into that side of the game, again, or learn the skills of photography or whatever hobby you are into, you're going to kind of just get to a point where you're stagnant and you're stuck at a certain point.
Yeah.
And you always want to try to go beyond that with what you're doing.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. When I was in junior high and high school, I got really into basketball. I was like when I was in junior high, I was like, I'm going to play on the high school basketball team. And I practiced my butt off. And like I was outside, You know, I'm not very coordinated with my left hand, but I was outside for hours just dribbling with my left hand and trying to shoot left hand, do layups left-handed, and you know, I got pretty decent at a lot of the technical stuff, but I never learned like just how the game operates. I got really good at the technical things, but I never learned a lot of those like, well, if I move here, how is this guy going to move here? And you know, I mean, if I set this, is this guy to move here? I never really learned any of that, so I never really became a good player in the sense of, you know, thinking about how the game works, and I remained stagnant there. I never really got very good because of that. You know, I could do a layup and I can shoot pretty well, but I never became a good player because of that.
Yeah, and I was kind of in the same boat when I played basketball. I could do a layup now, and I play defense, but that was about all I could do. I couldn't shoot, you know, but I never learned like the ins and outs of the game either.
Yeah.
Volleyball was different because I had 10 plus years in that game and learning from great people and mentors throughout my experience. But if you want to go to that next level, again, this is where we're talking about at every point in your journey, this applies. You have to learn like the principles, the strategy behind a lot of this stuff, because that is always going to be there, no matter what situation you're in. And it's not that you have to stick to the rules all the time, but if you're going to like end up breaking the rules, it's better to know what they are and do it purposefully in a way to kind of push the limits of where you could go.
Yeah, exactly. Man, sports just bring the perfect analogies for everything.
Sports are great, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a big thing in my background, like of how I've understood so many things, right? Again, we're talking about photography, but I can pull an example from coaching collegiate volleyball that applies just the same.
Yeah.
You know, and you understand it. And you're like, well, that actually makes a lot of sense to what we're talking about with the art scene.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter. Like, because these principles run through everything we do. You know, it's the same thing.
Yep.
But there's another aspect too that I want to touch on here that like I actually realized, and it to some degree kind of humbled me a little bit, because I was talking with our buddy Michael Pitts.
Great dude.
Great dude. Glad you came out and visited us, man. But we're chatting about photo stuff, and some of it's kind of composition, editing, style, whatever. And I was pointing out some things in like some photos I've taken. And he made the comment that he's like, well, you're also like a very analytical guy, which is very true. I have a math degree. But because of that, I might just have an easier time picking up on some of these things, which I never thought about really, right? And so you might be coming from a spot where it's not as natural for you to pick up these things. And so you'd be even more intentional about trying to search for whatever technique or principle or ideas that you can pick up. Whereas, you know, for me, it's like, I look at them like, oh, that's just, it's easy.
Yeah.
You just go here, you do that.
It's a little more obvious.
You go stand there, but like, you know, I've never like thought about it like that before.
Yeah.
You know, not that like, I don't know how different you really are, because you're kind of the same way. You go out and you just like look around and like, but that's the kind of activity that you have to engage with if you're actually going to pick up on these skills. You can't just walk out there and be like, oh, there's no photo here. It's like, no, like you have to kind of get there, get in the moment, and really like just take a step back and look for something new.
Yeah.
And if you're not actively doing that,
That's one of my favorite things to do lately is, I mean, so after you guys left on Sunday, Jared and I went and wandered around and did a little exploring, and I was kind of thinking about this. You know, we stopped at some spots where it was like, there's probably not a photo here, and it was like, no, there's a photo here. There's always a photo. You just have to find it.
Yeah, and I think that attitude is the attitude you need to have when you're going into any shoot. It doesn't matter if it's any genre. Doesn't matter. You should always go into something with the mindset of, there's a photo here to be had, but you just have to discover it.
Yeah.
And it may take a little bit more effort and time to unwrap it.
Yeah.
But there's something. And again, this may be switch to different gear.
Yeah.
Put a different lens on.
Yeah, yeah.
Put yourself at a different angle. Walk 30 yards that way. Whatever it's going to be. Like, you can create something. Maybe you should do a portrait here. Maybe it's not a landscape spot. Like, because I think we've talked about this before, actually. When we go out and shoot, you know, a lot of times we're chasing landscape stuff. It's great. It's fun. But like, there's times where conditions aren't great, and it's like, oh, well, now landscapes might kind of suck for that.
Yeah.
But I've always been like, you know what? Great. I
Portrait
can
time.
shoot. because like I can just switch gears
Yeah.
and go into something totally different, right? But it's that mindset. It's like there's something here,
Yeah.
and I'm going to chase it. But if you're not willing to adapt with your conditions, your scenario, whatever it is, you're going to be stuck.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I actually had this experience 2 weeks ago. I was shooting some family photos for a good friend of mine up Big Cottonwood Canyon, and we had planned on shooting around golden hour up there, but they had something come up, and they could only do. I mean, they could do that same day, but they could only do it about 1:30 in the afternoon, which is not good shooting conditions.
No.
It's midday, and so I was like, I don't know how we're gonna make this work, but we'll figure something out. And we got on location. I ended up changing locations to something that I thought might suit that kind of time of day, and we got there. And it took a little bit longer just because I had to kind of figure out how do I make this work? Where can I put them to, have this, not turn out bad or to have these not look weird. And, it took a little bit of, a little bit more effort, but they ended up being some of my favorite portraits that I've probably ever taken, and they ended up working out great. They look phenomenal. So, and that's what I mean. Like there's always even if it's the middle of the day, there's always something you can do.
Yeah, and I think that mindset is like it's a growth mindset.
Yeah,
and so I think you've gotten so good at what you do is because you've always approached it. It's like I'm going to figure something out.
Yeah,
even if it's like you come away with a bad photo, you're trying, and that's the important thing. You're gonna try something new. If it works, great. If it doesn't, so be it. You've at least tried. Now you have a memory. It's like, okay, this doesn't work, but I can tweak it this way next time, right? And that's important. That's an important part of like the learning phase and getting better.
Self-evaluation is vital.
It's just exploration and figuring that stuff out. So yeah, I think, I don't know, I feel like we've kind of covered from beginning to end.
Yeah, I think so.
With all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Not to say like we're at the end, but.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, I'm trying to go in reverse now. But but I think it'd be fun if we kind of wrap this episode up with the three of us. And let us just talk for a minute about where we think we are. And if we want to try to keep getting better, how can we, like, what direction we need to go in? Do we need to get some different gear? Or do we need to keep learning skills? So, BDOTES, can we start with you?
Yeah. So, I'm still rocking my A6000 that I started with.
Great camera.
Yep. Small but mighty. I think right now my main focus is developing a style in editing. I feel like I have the manual skill set down. It's just getting the editing style consistent. And you and I chatted about this
for like
last
2 hours.
Yeah. And we went through a bunch of pictures. You pointed out a couple things that I could do differently. I did them on my phone real quick and they looked cool. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely correct. I wish you could have been here for that conversation, so you.
I don't.
so you can know like what we were talking about, but like that's a big part of the growth phase as well. I went through that same thing.
Yeah,
like that's why like we were talking about that night. We've talked about it's like you see a photo of mine now, and you're like, oh, that's Luke's photo.
Yeah,
because like you know what my thing looks like, right?
Well, we actually had a night like that a couple years ago where we all got together and were editing photos, and it was you, me, and Derek. And we were exchanging photos. We did it like a little, let's edit each other's photos.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I went away with that like, oh, there's so much more that I can do with my
photos.
I was
trying to figure where you're going with that. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like that's a point there where if you're trying to get better, you can get gear, you can learn like the composition, the camera skills, but editing is a whole other facet that people not to skip over, but like. Maybe they can be afraid of too, because it can be intimidating.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially when you're trying to get certain looks that people get a lot on Instagram and stuff.
Yeah.
Like there are certain photographers out there where it's like, how did you get this look?
Yeah.
Or like when I was just talking earlier, how he made a certain photo, which, was literally a midday photo, blue sky with white clouds, and I turned it looking like a haunted place, and like that's pretty freaking cool, but. You don't get to that. You can't do that easily unless you spend the time learning the editing side of things.
Yeah.
And whether it's you're trying to learn fun little things like that or find your own style, that's a big part of, your growth process and getting to where you want to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And another thing that I've learned is to not try and do everything all at once. Like Chandler alluded to earlier about focusing on composition. And like right now I'm on editing. just like focus on a couple things at once. Go out and be like, I'm just going to make sure like my aperture is good. I'm getting good blur on the foreground or background, and just focus on that. And I think that's probably the best way to progress.
Yeah. So I want to take a little detour on that point as well, because that's another great point that I also implemented in my coaching. When I was teaching my setters, it's like, especially near the end of my time teaching, it was, okay, we're going to literally just break down the entire process of getting to a ball and putting a ball up to your hitter. Mm-hmm. But the very first thing we're going to work on is just getting your feet to the ball. I don't care how the ball comes out, if it's misplaced, if it's an illegal touch, doesn't matter. The only thing you need to get right on this rep is your feet. And then you spend some time doing that. And then you say, okay, your feet are looking really good now. Now, let's just make sure where you're catching the ball is where you need to be catching the ball. Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing that matters now. Because chances are good that after you spend the time working on the feet, that's going to be good from here on out. You may stray a little here and there, but you're going to be good on that side. But then you add one more skill on top of that. And then we get really good at where we're taking the ball. And then once that's really good, now the only thing that matters is what our release is like, you know, or like where our body weight is, whatever you want to add on next. But it's continuing to just add one thing on at a time and having that singular focus to the point where now you're just building on your toolbox, you know, of where with the base that you're working from and where and how you're going to get better. You know, that's a physical skill, you know, setting a ball in volleyball. But camera stuff applies the same way. Focus, you know, go out there and intentionally think about your aperture and what you do. When I'm shooting the same way, it's like, what aperture do you want for this shot? Think about your shutter speed. Think about your composition only. That's a great way to like really cement these things into your work and make them become not just like things you're trying to work on, but habits that you're nailing every time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, like now, you know, when I'm trying to focus on, you know, making more interesting compositions, the shutter speed, aperture, all that stuff it's already there, you know, so that's all second nature. And yeah, I don't even really have to think twice about that.
Right. And that's, we've talked about, I think, on the podcast before, when you're learning like the settings, like the basic 3 settings with shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, like you're figuring out how to shoot manual. And yeah, that can be kind of intimidating at first. But once you learn it, it's just second nature.
Yeah.
When I'm going out shooting, like, okay, here, boom, 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 it's like you just roll through the settings to get what you want. But you have to learn what each of those things do and like take the time to get those, you know, those ideas and those techniques cemented in your practice.
Yeah.
So let's jump to you now. Where do you think you are at in your journey, and how do you think you need to approach it in order to keep getting better?
Well, I always will feel like I have so much to learn.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. You're so mean.
I'm very supportive.
I know. No, I'm very self-critical with my photos and very nitpicky about you know the images that I make. But
he is. Watch his editing sessions.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
He makes changes. I'm like, dude, you spent 30 minutes on that I would never even thought about. And like, I can't even tell the difference.
Yeah. It's subtle. It's subtlety.
Yeah, what would you say your average radial gradient is on your
How many
editing?
per photo? 5, 7,
30,
20?
35?
Oh, probably, yeah, 5 or 7. Yeah. No, I think, you know, like right now, I have a lot of that basic stuff. It's you know, it's second nature to me. I don't struggle with that. I don't even think twice about it. So kind of like I mentioned before, I'm really focusing on compositions. I spent a lot of time studying the work of different photographers that, you know, who have been doing this for 20, 30 years, and kind of that the kind of work that, you know, that speaks to me and is striking to me, and trying to figure out like, well, what is it about this photo that I like? Is it the edit? Is it the composition? Is it the actual, you know, the subject? And trying to figure exactly what that is. And, you know, I found that a lot of times it's the composition, and a lot of times it's just, I need to be, you know, I've gone through a lot of my work, you know, again, this is that self-reflection thing. I've gone through a lot of my work, and I'm like, my compositions could be a lot better. They could be more interesting. They could be, you know, less boring, I think, you know? And And so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm at a weird spot where it's like I like a lot of the work that I do, and I like everything that I'm putting out for the most part. But I know it could be better, and I want it to be better. It's just about making putting the work in to make it, putting the work in and the time into making it better. So
yeah, there was something in what you just said that I want to maybe flesh out a little bit. I want to wrap this whole thing up, but there's great ideas that are coming up, which is awesome. And you said that you look at a photo and you're like, well, what is it I like about this photo? Is it the edit? Is it the composition? It could be a number of things. And I think a lot of times, especially when you're starting out, you see someone who's got a great look, style, wherever, on Instagram, and you say, I want to shoot like that. I think a lot of times we almost skip that question. And maybe we jump more to like the edit first, but it's like we need to think about what it is in these photos that we truly like. I can think about a lot of the people that I saw, early on. It's like, I like their photos, but it's like, I'm always like, I want to edit like them. And that's great, but you should also want to take photos like them. And what is it about the photo itself that sticks out? Because you can learn to edit all you want.
Yeah.
But a great edit is not going to take a terrible photo and make it great. Like you could, if your composition is garbage and you can edit like some of the greatest, photographers you see on Instagram, like cool, like you got the colors and stuff, but it's not a great photo. Like you got to learn both. And that's where I think you said that. I was like, we need to at least mention that aspect of it.
You got to learn how to make a good photo, learn how to make a great photo, and then take that editing and make it a phenomenal photo.
Right.
So
I'll wrap it up with me. I'm in a little tricky situation because I don't care as much about the photo stuff anymore.
Yeah,
That's why I joked about going in reverse.
Yeah, you're suddenly the anti-photographer.
I'm the anti-photographer. It's the role I was born to play.
Yeah.
But it's not that I don't want to take photos. It's just that it's not the most important thing to me anymore, right?
Yeah.
But if I want to go out and get better still, I think for me, the way that I'm going to do that is largely through different gear. Only because I'm very limited in my setup now, and at least for the kind of photos I take now, I feel like I'm good. Like I'm satisfied with it. I have no desire to improve those necessarily. But like I said, if I want to shoot wildlife, or if I want to shoot the moon, or whatever that's going to be, I'm literally going to need physical gear to do that.
Yeah.
And obviously in approaching new avenues like that in different genres that I don't do now, there will be learning curves on how to take better photos too. So like it gets into the arguments, well, yeah, I should still be learning stuff. But I think for me, ultimately, it comes down to the gear question of just what I want to do. Like when Michael's here, I'm like, dude, I might want to learn FPV.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's just, that's a gear, and there's skills involved with flying an FPV drone that are not present in flying a regular drone. But like, it's just things like that is kind of where I feel like I find myself.
Yeah.
So, all right. Any more questions? BDOTES, any comments?
Nope.
Okay. Chandler, anything?
I don't think I have anything.
Okay. Well, if we got nothing else, we're going to move on to the segment we are trying to end every episode with now. If you've watched our previous couple episodes, as we've restarted this podcast back up this fall, we have decided we want to fill the back of this table with new items. We have some we'll be putting on, but if you at home want to send us something, we would love to feature it on the table and put it on the podcast one day. So please reach out. Don't make it too big. We got to keep some space, though. As I say that, the item I have today is a little big.
Oh.
But I have something that the idea, the lesson behind it kind of applies to this conversation a little bit, especially maybe the way I've approached my work. I don't know about you guys, but we'll chime in as we go. So the item we have today.
And remember, we don't know what this is.
I'm thinking like Excel spreadsheet due to your analytics.
It is not
property.
an Excel spreadsheet. I'm sorry to
It's
disappoint
like a
you.
printed out screenshot of Excel.
Right. Just
But-
like
Staple.
just the emblem or the
Yeah,
logo.
here you go.
Yeah.
But that gives me ideas for the future, though. But today, I actually have a decoration I used to have up in my, not old house, but the apartment I was in downtown. And you would have seen this on the wall before, but I don't think I had it up anywhere in the house when we lived there.
I might know what this is.
Yeah. This is a board
Yep.
with some Japanese lettering on it. It's really big, so I hope this is in frame enough. I'll put it on this side here. Now, this is also my really
Producer says it is in frame.
awesome. Thank you, producer. But this is my okay job at trying to paint Japanese lettering on a board. It's not great, but these 4 symbols make up the term Ichigo Ichi, which loosely translate to like things only happen once and enjoy the moment and be there, right? So you can attest to this, and you know too. I mean, you can see it right now. On the back of my camera, I've had a sticker that says "Be present" on there for, I mean, as long as I can remember
Long
now.
time, yeah.
It's probably at least 2 years. But for me, the way I've approached it, and the way I think I've also gotten a lot better, this is where I'm trying to tie this back in, if I can, is being very present when I'm shooting and knowing what I'm trying to shoot for, and to get that look. Like when I'm shooting with my 50, and you can attest to this too, because you've been out with me the most when I've been doing this. When I'm shooting with my 50, try to get a portrait or something, I'm like looking for a very specific shot of someone or something, and I'm not just going to take every shot I want. I'm working for that one shot, and I will be out there and I'll say, no, this isn't it. And I may give up if I can't figure it out, but I'm always searching for something. I'm in the moment looking for the exact thing that I want, you know, and that's, I think, a way that you can kind of ground yourself when you're out in the field in practice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I've been trying to do better at as well. I didn't mention this before, but now you bring this up. It reminds me about this, but there's a lot of landscape photographers who are, you know, that I really, really look up to. And they always talk about make sure you spend time in the field, spend time on location, get to know it, and be present in it, and you'll get way better photos doing that. Instead of just showing up for sunset, shooting, and then leaving, you know? Like we went to a couple spots this last weekend where we spent a good amount of time there, and it gave me the time to kind of walk around and get to know the place a little bit and see things that I wouldn't normally see.
Yeah.
And it produced what I think are some pretty good photos.
Yeah,
So,
and like that's like the lesson. It's like be there, because that moment only happens once, right? So be there, be present, be mindful, and in that you're going to naturally find yourself discovering more things about the scene and noticing things about that moment and again what the scene looks like that you wouldn't have before.
absolutely.
And that's where you start to, you know, that becomes more your normal practice when you're out shooting. And that's when your game is going to go way up. So that's
I love it.
That's why I brought this today. So I was like, this is perfect.
It's great, yeah.
So, BDOTES, any comments?
Nope.
Okay.
Man, a few words.
Man, a few words. But yeah, so we're going to put this on the table.
What a great addition.
Like I said, if you have anything you'd like to send us, feel free to send it our way, and one day we may feature it on the podcast. We'd love to do that.
Yeah.
You know, we want to try to engage with you guys at home as much as possible, and we feel like this is a good way to do that. So, yeah, well, I think that's all we have for today. Again, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment, especially if you've got something you want to add to this conversation. This is a great one to get everyone else's opinions on. But we're on YouTube, all podcasting platforms, you name it, we're everywhere, man. So follow us on Instagram. If you got questions, anything like that, come follow us, ask the questions.
Yeah, please do.
We try to-
Absolutely.
If you want to go hang out outside, just message us.
Yeah, if
Yes.
you just want to like hang out with cool people, we're pretty cool people. I'd like to think so.
Yeah. Well, you guys should hang out with BDOTES.
BDOTES is the man.
Yeah.
BDOTES, you're the man.
You are the man.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. Please hit us up any way you want. You know, we'll do our best to get back to you guys. So I think with that, we're out.
Peace.
Bye.